This episode of VDCTV Friday at 4 was pre-recorded from remote locations. You will not be able to comment or ask questions on today's show because, unfortunately, it is not live. But feel free to comment in case we have the opportunity to ask questions to Secretary Saunders again. Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by Procter Gas, the propane people. Are you a homeowner wishing to convert your home to propane gas so you can enjoy energy efficiency and off-grid living? Procter Gas provides comprehensive services and a variety of products from leading brands in Rutland, Vermont, and beyond. Count on Procter Gas for propane tank installation, gas line installation and repair, propane appliances and water heaters, and so much more. They work with a wide variety of propane tank sizes in all types of residential settings. Procter Gas in Rutland.
Secretary Saunders, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When you moved up here last year, some people were saying, well, this person's from Florida. What do they know about Vermont? How's your family handling the Vermont weather?
We've really enjoyed the move to Vermont, and I have family here in Vermont. So part of the move from Florida to Vermont was to be closer to my sister and my aunt and family that are here in Vermont. We've spent a lot of time visiting the state, and we're really happy to be now living here permanently in Vermont. And we have adjusted to the cold. We have been skiing with the family and really creating new traditions. So it's been wonderful.
That's wonderful. Do you have any family members like going to UVM or in public schools?
Yeah, I do. Yep, I have a niece at University of Vermont. So very much connected to Vermont and really happy to be here and proud to serve in this role and helping to improve our public education system.
Does she give you feedback on Zoie, here's what I think should happen?
I would say I have a great support system with my family, but try to keep them out of the politics.
I think so. Right. When you came here, some of the legislators were really pushing back on your appointment for how it was done, et cetera, and the fact that you have a sort of a private school backgrounds, kind of school choice background. So have most of the legislators sort of accepted you by now? How's that working out?
So to clarify, I don't have a background in private school. My focus has in my career been on public education, and I've had experience in multiple states in really providing great public educational options for students, particularly in high needs communities. My entry into Vermont came at a point of incredible stress. And there was a time last spring when everyone was grappling with an unprecedented number of school budgets failing and really reckoning with how we're going to appropriately fund our education system in a way that's going to be equitable. So when I came into the role, there was a lot of stress and I was new to Vermont. I applied for this job and thought it was a great opportunity for me to be able to share my expertise and helping to address some of the challenges that Vermont is facing and some of the challenges that I've supported that are similar in other states and other communities across the country. So at this point, I think everyone's really recognizes that this is a time where we need to make some substantive changes to the way we fund and deliver education. And we need to do that to support equity for our students and also to ensure affordability for taxpayers. So I think this legislative session, we're starting that conversation with an understanding that we need to make changes, and we need to do that in a way that is thoughtful and strategic and supportive of our shared goals for education in the state. So I think the conversations have been really engaging. As you know, the governor's put forward a very comprehensive plan, and there are a lot of questions around the plan, and we are very encouraged by the level of engagement that we're having on different aspects of it. And we welcome that because it's going to be important to engage and factor in all the considerations to strengthen this proposal and ensure it has a great impact on students.
So what are some of the major ways that this plan is different from how things are being done right now?
Yeah. So this plan really is comprehensive in its approach. I think, a lot of the challenges that we're facing in terms of declining enrollment, increased spending, declining outcomes, all of those things have been well documented over the years. And I think we've tried to address them in a couple of different ways. We're at the point now where people understand we really need to address them more comprehensively. We can't just kind of pick around the edges to make minor tweaks to our system, because the challenges are so complex. So this plan puts forward a comprehensive approach that proposes changes to how we fund education, how we govern education, and also how we measure and support education quality. It is very connected in making sure that everything we do in this proposal is about students and supporting student opportunities. This plan, as part of the funding model, moves us to a foundation formula. The rationale for that is to ensure that students that have similar needs receive similar resources, regardless of where they live or the wealth of their community. Right now, we can't say that is happening in practice. Right now, we see great variability in terms of spending across communities, and we know that our higher need communities struggle the most to pass their budgets, so are often forced to cut and cut and cut more services. And we're concerned that if we don't make broader changes, that we're going to continue to have a great disparity in terms of educational opportunities for our students. So the funding that we're proposing is a foundation formula. It's based on research. It's an evidence-based model to identify those resources that are needed in order to provide a well-rounded, robust education for every school. And then there are adjustments or weights based on need of the student. So if a student qualifies for free and reduced lunch or is an English learner, there would be additional dollars, recognizing that those students will require further support. The plan does require to think about scale. And so that's why the governance is part of this proposal. The proposal moves us from 119 school districts to 5 school districts. And that's largely intended to achieve scale so that we can really bring in additional resources and support for our schools. This allows us also to pay our teachers a more competitive wage to ensure that schools are able to offer a range of special allied arts programs and college and career exploration.
Today's episode is brought to you by One Day in July Investment Management. As financial advisors, One Day in July provides personalized investment management and financial advice to individuals, families, and institutions. They work with clients to understand their financial goals and build investment solutions. They are fiduciaries on all accounts for all clients. One Day in July is based in Burlington, Vermont.
So is the idea here less management, less bureaucracy, more money for the teachers and the programming? Is that sort of where that's going?
Certainly, the complexity of our current system diverts dollars away often from where they're needed most, which is in the classroom. And so it does move us into a more, efficient governance structure. It also changes how we think about our central office. So currently, our central offices across our districts. So we also have 52 supervisory unions that oversee 119 districts. So there's a lot of complexity as you think about structuring that. Those administrative roles often have to focus on more compliance work because regardless of your size, each district will be required to meet federal and state compliance. And as you can imagine, there's a lot involved in that. So what this does is says, with the leadership roles at the central office, certainly there are leaders and experts that would be helping with those compliance components, but it also allows us to pool resources to bring in leaders in specialized areas that can provide support for students that help with professional development and college and career planning and special education in ways that we think will really enrich the offerings available to our students.
Yes, I understand that there's a sort of a base foundational amount per student, and then districts that want to spend more can vote for that, and that the cost, if I understand it right, and I asked this at the press conference last week, and I didn't quite understand the answer, I guess, is that spending above that amount that a school district chooses to do will be socialized throughout the rest of the state. It seems to me that's what the plan says. How is that really any different from what spectacularly did not work last year, which was a lot of districts said, oh, well, Brattleboro is going to pay for our gym up here in Roxbury. We're just going to build a new gym. I'm just picking on Roxbury. I don't think they actually did that.
So what's really different about this proposal is we're coming in with a base funding amount that is very generous, and also adjustments based on need that are very generous when compared to how other states fund education. We feel that these resources will be able to provide a great education for our students across the state. We recognize that there may be instances where a district may want to raise additional revenue to support a specific project or new initiative to get it off the ground. And we're really looking at that as the extra. This is really not needed to fund the system. And so as we think about that ability to raise a local share, we do need to be thoughtful around establishing caps around that and what the state would be able to support and up to what limit. In these conversations, the Brigham decision comes front and center in making sure that there is parity in property tax wealth, meaning that communities have an equal opportunity to raise additional dollars. So part of the movement towards the 5 regions is designed to support greater equity in terms of property wealth, so that equalization mechanism would not be needed as much as it would be in our current system. So in our current system, when we're comparing property wealth, there's an 11-time difference between kind of the highest property wealth and lowest property wealth. Within this proposal with these specific districts, it gets us to a difference of 2 to 1. So when you think about the difference of kind of any sort of equalization mechanism that the state employs to address Brigham, it's much less, because you're really thinking about the broader needs of communities, and these communities are really making decisions that are going to be in the best interest of low property wealth, high property wealth communities across their region.
Today's episode of VDC TV Friday at 4 is brought to you by Ranmar Corporation. Ranmar Corporation has been serving central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They're a local, family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Contact Ranmar Corporation today for all of your contracting and real estate needs.
So there's also a school choice component with a lottery in here. A lot of my readers have sent their kids to religious schools, private religious schools. Will the Rice High Schools and the Bishop John Marshall School, et cetera, Mid-Vermont Christian, will they be part of that? Will they be sort of factored into any sort of public funding in any way here?
As you've noted, we currently have school choice in our system, and this plan is designed to be more intentional and strategic around how and where we have school choice, and that a lot of those decisions are based within the district, depending around kind of the existing school portfolio and where there may be need for more specialized programs. Specific to independent schools could apply to be a school of choice school in this model, and also public schools could be a school choice school in this model. So it's really designed to think about how we best organize choice within a system and in a framework that is going to allow for children to have those specialized programs, while at the same time investing in very strong local public schools. In Vermont, we don't have a special classification for different types of independent schools. So there's no special classification for an independent school that's secular versus religious. And so that would just follow the same course in terms of meeting criteria to be able to deliver on the educational opportunities and to also show financial viability. What is unique also about this approach is ensuring that we have shared accountability to outcomes. And that really goes back to ensuring that we're investing those public dollars in ways that are going to best serve students.
So a state senator and some of the independent school folks have met on the 31st, and the senator suggested that maybe the secular independent schools should suggest that the including the religious schools, and is funding is, quote, messing up for everyone else. So there seems to be in the legislature a little bit of a push to kind of say, no, these religious schools, they're not part of this. If that comes up, how are you going to respond to that?
So there's federal law governing how dollars are shared. If you share public dollars for education with private schools, which we refer to as independent schools within our context. So that would definitely be part of that conversation. I would say around choice, there's a lot of different discussions happening just around, how does that best serve students? What type of programming do we want available? How do we make sure that every child has an option to really pursue their interest? So I think the conversation around choice is really much broader than that. And what we're trying to do is to create an ecosystem that has a strong foundation of public schools and allows for educational options that meet a child's interest, and that there's shared accountability within the system, that all of our programs are delivering educational excellence for students.
So last night, Linda McMahon, who's the Trump appointee for the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, said she wants to shift away from D.C. to the states. And right now, I think 90% of your agency's budget, I believe, and not the whole school systems, but your agency in particular is federally funded, about 90%. How do you think this is going to play out in D.C. and how's this going to affect things in Montpelier? In your agency?
Yeah. So I didn't come today with to clarify the number that are funded and what source, be that federal or state. But I think overall, what we're trying to do with this proposal is to create a sustainable state education system. And I've often talked about the term of future proofing our system. And making sure that we really are investing dollars in ways that have great impact and that we're financially viable and also less vulnerable to changes at the federal level. And that's part of what this program is designed to do. Is we're really still going to be one of the top spenders in education in the country, but this proposal is really investing those dollars in ways that are going to maximize their benefit to students. As it relates to changes in the federal level, we're approaching that very in a very methodical way of evaluating what that impact will be as those decisions are made coming down the pike. But I think there's a lot more conversation that would happen around that and how we would still manage federal dollars that would flow through to the state. I think there's still an intent that those dollars would be flowing through, and how state agencies will be supporting that certainly will be part of that conversation. And we'll be focused on looking at the entire system. And that's what we're doing here. We're looking at the entire system and thinking about what expertise is needed at your agency, your state agency of education, what's needed at the school district level, what's needed down at the principal leadership and school all the way to the classroom. That's what we're trying to design here so that we have a really world-class education compared and great offerings.
So town meeting's coming up in about a month now, less than a month. People will be deciding on their local school budgets. Vermont is one of the oldest states in the nation. A lot of people, the kids are out, they're not in school anymore. What do you tell voters who say, look, this doesn't affect me anymore, except the fact that I'm paying taxes and I'm on a relatively fixed income. Why should I vote yes on the school budget?
So I think voting on the school budget is different than kind of thinking about the broader plan that we're contemplating. So what we're talking about with our plan is that this is Vermont as a unique opportunity to really make decisions that are in the best interest of taxpayers and also in the best interest of students, because all of what we're proposing is about improving educational opportunities. And we're doing that in a way that will allow us to be more efficient and more stable as a state, which also has a benefit to taxpayers. So I think it's really, it's kind of a win-win from the education and the taxpayer side. And we were really intentional about designing that system in a way that's going to drive quality. Also, we know that schools are really central to building vibrant communities. And so, as the governor has put forward this plan, he's been really clear that this is about building strong schools, supporting our students, and building vibrant communities. We know that a school is a big factor of why families move to communities, why businesses would relocate here or establish a headquarters. And so it's more than, it's really an important part of our overall state planning to ensure that we have the best schools in every part of our state.
So there's this possibly moving towards bigger schools, I understand. Also, that would seem to mean more transportation. If you have fewer school buildings, bigger schools, more travel. Is that kind of what we're looking at? And does this possibly mean that some schools will be closing?
So again, all of this would be in a multi-year approach. So in our modeling, we have assumed that we will be retaining largely our current school portfolio, but making some adjustments in terms of how those are staffed and operated. And then in time, we will be developing criteria for schools that are small by choice versus small by necessity. So we have to be practical as we do this work. We know that there are some parts of our state where it makes more sense to have a small school because the next closest school might be an hour's drive away, right? Or that school might be at the top of the mountain, or that school might have a smaller facility, and it may make more sense to operate at a smaller scale than building another wing. So those are all conversations that we're going to need to have over time. But what we're going to make sure that's happening is that we're meeting educational quality standards and that each school is financially viable to be able to deliver the continuity of operational support and educational delivery. So transportation is part of that conversation. Currently, Vermont does not require that districts provide transportation. There is a reimbursement mechanism at 50%. Within our initial modeling, we've doubled the transportation cost, assuming that there would be more reimbursed. And we'll do further modeling as we actually look at what those operational patterns will be. Something we see in our current system is there's a lot of inefficiency with how we do our transportation routes because they're organized in a very small context. So you might have buses from different districts that are passing each other on the same highway. So part of this plan also, as you go to the broader regions, is we can be intentional around creating those bus loops in ways that would help us to be more efficient and also to do contract negotiation in a different way that may help reduce costs. So there's a lot to consider when you're thinking about transportation, but to answer your question directly, we have built in some additional assumptions around cost, and we also think there will be more efficiencies available as well.
You mentioned cost. I understand you're talking about more long-range planning. I understand that, but a lot of taxpayers know that they were hit with a, at one point, like 20% tax increase last year. So is this year going to be anything like that? Are we looking at a repeat of that, or will it be less this year as far as we know?
In the governor's budget address, he signaled an intent to buy down the property taxes just close to zero as possible. And the intent of that is to create stabilization in our system so that we can focus on doing this broader transformational work that will be necessary for us to be more sustainable moving forward and to rein in spending in a responsible way that will, in this proposal, also have the added benefit of improving educational opportunities for students.
So my last question, Secretary Saunders, I just want to really give you the floor because I know that you must know an awful lot that people just aren't thinking about that's really important. So what are most Vermonters sort of not realizing, but really need to know about Vermont's education, present and future?
Yeah. I've traveled all across the state, and so I've had the benefit of really seeing, amazing educators in action, of working with our schools, talking with different communities. I've also had the benefit of looking at a lot of statewide data trends. And so with that, I think sometimes at the local level, people may not be aware that there's significant inequity in our system. And that's what we're trying to address with this proposal. Our hyper local budgeting creates some challenges for us to ensure that we're meeting the needs of every student across the state. This plan is making sure that every child that has a similar need is getting similar resources. And what we're seeing across the state is that's not happening. There's some schools that, even though they'd like to be able to offer more programming for their students, they're not able to. Whereas a school that maybe is operating at scale with additional resources and they've passed a budget that has higher per pupil spending is able to offer a lot more programming for students. So we really see that as an equity issue, and that is driving our work in developing this proposal in a way that's going to make sure that we are fair, that we are giving opportunity for every student in all parts of Vermont. And to do that, I think everyone buys into that concept. And Vermonters feel really care so deeply about education, but it requires us to do our work a little bit differently, to organize differently, and to think about funding in a new way to ensure we can deliver on that promise for students.
Well, thank you very much for coming on to VDC's Friday at 4. Maybe we'll ask you back, because I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of questions saying, why didn't you ask?
There's a lot to ask, and I would say that also that when the governor put forward this plan, it came with a call to action to engage in dialogue around these important issues. And I'm in testimony pretty much every day at the legislature and talking with stakeholders across the state. That's really important as we need to bring in all of those important considerations to getting this right, and making sure that the path forward will be really supportive of our students and also ensure we have a world-class education system that Vermonters can afford. We're very committed to that, and I assume there will be more questions. I'd be delighted to come back on and be able to help answer those questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Perro's Gun Shop. Discover Perro's, Vermont's premier firearms destination located in Waterbury. Explore an unparalleled selection of firearms complemented by their exclusive indoor firearm range, the one of its only kind in Vermont. Elevate your skills with their comprehensive professional training classes tailored to every level of expertise. At Perro's, they're dedicated to providing exceptional service and expertise for all of your firearms needs. Thank you for tuning in to today's special edition of Friday at 4. Happy Valentine's Day and have a lovely weekend.